Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the effect of decades of vehement and savage anti-white propaganda all across the Western world. Now, it's been going on for probably longer in the United States, but it's been going on since the 1980s up to the present day. And we're told white supremacists and Nazis and fascists are everywhere, and all the bad people, who are only white people, by the way, are just everywhere. It's an omnipresent miasma of Nazis, all white Nazis, white supremacists, racist, fascist Nazis, and they're everywhere doing bad things today and have been doing throughout history, going back to, whenever. White people are always the bad guys, and white people are uniquely evil, evil upon evil, and they must atone for their wickedness. And this has fallen into a wider sort of category and umbrella, if you like, of Christianity, white people, and again, all of white history. But also feeding into this is the patriarchy, or the supposed patriarchy, misogyny, and so on. So on one side, white people are demonized, white men in particular, straight white men in particular, but white people generally have been demonized. Now, from what I can tell, it's hard to see that any of the demonization is accurate or contextual or factual in really any way. And looking at a recent documentary done by a rabid leftist black activist, where English white people are demonized, uphill and down dale, then it seems, why is this hysterical propaganda being pushed about? And again, it's been around now we're looking at, it's pushing 40 to 45 years of this insane propaganda. Now, I'll sort of go back and give a bit of history to it, if anything, to give the understanding. The crimes and the determination and measurement of crimes that white people have committed, particularly white male Christians, this determination of crimes is ideological. So there's a beginning point where, look, all straight white male Christians are the most evil of the evil, and symbolism with that, and we'll have Hitler, will be the association. We want to condemn white people, we just go Nazi, fascist, swastika, Hitler, and that's it. So they've got sort of that associative point. Now, whenever you see people being demonized, and it's everywhere, then you see that association. And the attempt to then associate Nazi conquests with, empire, the British Empire, for example, and to push that narrative. Now, I wouldn't mind so much if it was accurate and true, and that, for example, just looking at a recent documentary about slavery, they make no mention at all about Africans enslaving each other. They make no mention at all about slavery having been an institution since the beginning of time. And they make no mention of that slavery continued in Africa up to the present day, in fact. So they just focus on one thing, that it was the white English, or white people, but particularly the English, that enslaved blacks when they didn't. They brought already enslaved people from the black kings and warlords and so on already in Africa, blacks enslaving each other. None of this is mentioned. The inference, and this is by omission as much as anything, but the inference is that only white people ever did slavery, and that all black people were enslaved, and it was a uniquely white and evil institution that only white people ever did. There's no mention that white people ended slavery. That's not mentioned in this documentary. There's no mention that Africans are still enslaving each other today. So by omission and by refusal to add even the slightest bit of context, and by engaging in large-scale lies and misrepresentation, white people could be demonized. Now, as a kid or just somebody looking at that document, wow, white people are so fucking evil. They should be made to account. They should be held to account for that evil that goes back centuries. We've got to punish those evil white people. And that's pretty much the sentiment that has been developed and exploited and in the present day. Now, we see examples of this in, say, there was a recent court case in the United States where a black guy, well, it's it's been through the courts now, but a black guy with a knife came up and stabbed a white guy in this is in the United States, and it's an open and shut case. It's caught on video. There's nothing there to, there's no evidence you got to go over. It's dead to rights. There's no ambiguity or uncertainty in this one. Yet the jury acquitted the black guy. They accepted that he'd been walking around a knife. They accepted he was a career criminal. They accepted that he stabbed the white guy. But the white guy used a racial slur at some time after he was stabbed, not before, not after. Not that whether it was before was relevant. So really, the white guy is guilty. He carries a legacy and miasma of white supremacist, evil, fascist, Nazi, swastika guilt. So he kind of got what was coming to him. Hey, we got to balance the ledger somehow. This black guy's a victim, slavery, and the white guy, evil, because how is he evil? Well, he's white and he's male. And, he went to church a couple of times. I mean, gee whiz, what more? So the guilt is determined or predetermined ideologically. So the courts are becoming effectively courts of attainder. ATTAINDER, courts of attainder. And so this court was, well, the facts kind of don't really matter. The ideology is what matters here. And because he used a racial slur and because he's white and that sort of thing, we're going to acquit the black guy because, well, the white guy is ideologically guilty. But the black guy stabbed him. So what? Slavery and white supremacy and so on. Now, I think that even with ideology playing a large role in such an open and shut case, this is still unusual that the judge allowed it to stand. If a jury reaches a verdict that's so out of line with the evidence, a judge can overturn it. And the prosecution can appeal it if they want. My understanding is the judge made no attempt to overturn it, approved of the outcome, and the state, as in the prosecutors, who seemed to be, I thought, rather half-hearted in pursuing the prosecution. They didn't really want to. They kind of had to. It was on video. It was, they kind of had to do something, but they didn't appear to be particularly zealous. Whereas if they're pursuing cases against white people, for may have some sort of racial implications, they will pursue the case with the utmost vigor, no expenses spared. And so we're looking at a two-tier justice here, but this overall miasma of white people, fascist, Nazi, Hitler, slavery, swastika, and that hangs like a haze over court cases where race is involved. It was two white people be different or two black people be different. But it hangs over. Now, this goes back when I first noticed the beginnings of these ideology being the deciding factor in the divorce courts, and I was losing quite a few. I was like VP of the product R&D and product development, this particular company, and there were some highly paid programmers and product developers there. And they were losing. I was losing them because of divorce and they're getting wiped out, and because because they were on a high income, their the alimony and child support and all sorts of other things that were so crippling that they just couldn't afford to keep on working in a high income job, so they would just leave. But some of the stories they were telling me were sort of just crazy. I didn't believe in some of this stuff. But when you sort of investigate more closely, you see that there's an ideology that's driving in that instance, the divorce courts, where, well, we all know the family unit is a unit of oppression It's evil oppression, and it's social power, and it's the fault line of gender conflict. So we have to even up the odds. So even if the guy is well behaved, solid sort of husband and father, even if that is the case, he's still really guilty, because the family unit is an institution of oppression, and so he really has to be. We have to level the score here. For family unit has been an institution of oppression for centuries, so we have to make him pay compensation today for all the evil that's gone before, and the evil of today, and the family and that, and the mere fact he's the higher income earner. This is proof of his oppression and his social power and so on. So we have to punish him for that and compensate her. So we just have to do that. And it's the right thing to do ideologically. What's the legal basis for this, or the law, or that doesn't really matter. We're talking about ideology here. And so this, I noticed there was another case where a guy was, in similar circumstances, and he was being punished for this. Now, I also spoke to, and this sort of spills over into rape, but particularly if it's middle-class white guys, because rape, if it's done by black guys or third world people, they're usually dead to rights. There's no lack of evidence or anything like that. They've usually got them. Whereas in white guy rape, it's a he said, she said, date rape. Did she have half a glass of wine too much? That type of thing. So it's very technical sort of stuff. There are cases where both parties have been fully consensual, and where she has pursued him, saying, I want you to fuck me, and this, sending texts and this sort of thing. And yet they'll still find some ideological basis that the guy was still really at fault. Now, he may only get a year in prison, but they still want to throw him in jail. There's still an ideological component there that men oppress are bad, women victim good, these sorts of things. And so that was on the gender side. And I've spoken, as I've mentioned sort of previously, I've spoken to a specialist rape prosecutor, and her view was and she's quite clear about it. She wasn't even shy in declaring it. Her view was that we're really, all men are guilty of rape anyway. So even if we send an innocent man to prison, for a rape he didn't commit, even if we send an innocent man to prison, that's still okay, because in the overall sort of ideological guilt and miasma of guilt and so on, he's kind of still guilty. He's part of that group that's getting past social power and ideology and so on. So he's still kind of guilty, even if he's not guilty of the crime that he's accused of. So it's still okay if he goes to prison. And if we send 10 innocent men to prison but get one guilty man, that's okay. That's fine, because we still got the guilty guy. And if the innocent guys didn't commit that crime, they probably would have done some other crime anyway. So, it's still not a problem. Now, this is a breathtaking attitude. I mean, like, wow, whoa, 10 innocent men go to prison because ideology, they're kind of all guilty ideologically anyway. And now we're looking at the same here on racial lines, where decades of demonization of white people that's all occurring. Every aspect of demonization of white people, certainly that I've seen, and I know quite a history buff, every aspect I've seen has been it's been lies, it's been inventions, it's been fabrications, it's been the most grotesque untruths, one after another, being taught in schools and universities, documentaries, and it's just an endless stream of lies and untruths and inventions and fabrications to suggest that white people are uniquely evil and have been for many hundreds of years. Do you mind if we look at Genghis Khan or something? No. So because of this constant barrage of white people being evil and bad, they must atone for their sins, they must feel guilty. And, and this is, of course, very much part of the globalist project, in order to soften white people up so they don't resist the mass migration and their replacement. there needs to be this constant barrage of guilty, 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 evil, evil, Nazi, fascist, constant barrage of that. And this is where we are today. And we can see this in, for example, there was another United States case. Black people have been told that they've been uniquely victimized by evil white people. So killing white people, well, there's nothing really wrong with it. You're just fighting back against your oppressor. So a school kid stabbed to death a black school kid stabbed a white kid, and the black kid's still walking around today. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a full court hearing. I don't know how you can get guilty, not guilty verdicts for something so open and shut as the case I mentioned earlier. Is the whole jury black? If so, why did the prosecution not object to jurors that quite clearly were unable to deliver an impartial verdict? Is that part of the state just pretending to care about white people being stabbed to death? Is that just part of their shtick? Wouldn't you object to, or is the courts organising that only activist black jurors are made available, the same way that they made sure that only activist New Yorkers were hearing the Trump case about that records keeping issue? So there's a lot of ideological stacking. The court administrative staff will be activists. The judge is probably an activist. The prosecutor is probably an activist. The defense attorney will definitely be an activist. And are they just conspiring to make sure that only activist jurors are hearing the case? Because you've got a situation where the jury is saying, no, he definitely stabbed him. It definitely was unprovoked. It definitely was the crime has definitely been committed. No, the guy's got a long rap sheet. So all of that, not guilty. And you cannot arrive at that verdict unless you've been ideologically brainwashed to believe that, well, he didn't. The white guy's a white guy. He's a fucking white supremacist Nazi. Got what was damn well coming to him. And so, unless you take that ideological view, again, they've had 40 plus years of this propaganda being thrown at them. The reason you're flunking out of school isn't because you can't be bothered, or because you never turn up, or because you're disruptive in class, or because you're low IQ. None of that. It's Whitey. Whitey took it all from you. And as long as you're being barraged with that amount of which they are, barraged with that propaganda, then it doesn't take long before it's suddenly acceptable to go killing people. But it's okay. I haven't really done anything. Look how evil they are. I've rid the world of Hitler, so I should be praised for that. And until we address that, so look, this is where it is. Until that's addressed as an issue. So if you call someone a white supremacist or a Nazi or a fascist or racist, that needs to be held up in the same category as the N-word. And if you take the derivative of the Latin word for black, it's that N-word. Then until we get to that stage where it has to be illegal to demonize another race, and if you do it through lies and untruths, for example, pretending that only white people ever did slavery, this sort of thing, then that should now carry legal penalties, in my view. And if we don't reverse this, the basis for racial civil war is being created in front of our very eyes. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.